A 70-year-old woman vanishes without a trace.
It had been about a month since anybody had talked to her.
I even left her some messages. Can you please just call and let us know you're okay?
Her former caretaker tells police she went on a trip with friends.
She was coming back with some friends. Don't know who the people are.
Bank records showed that her card had been used at 2 different gas stations.
But a search of her home reveals the horrifying truth.
The detective went in the house. He said it reeked of incense. There were just a ton of flies.
What I see is a big mound of concrete and what looks like a human shoulder, hair.
It just absolutely broke my heart when I heard what had happened to her.
And the evidence points to a killer no one expected.
She's smart. She thought, hey, you know, I'm gonna have time to get my story straight.
Did you not kill her? Look at me. Look at me and be honest with me.
I am being honest.
You killed her, didn't you?
July 29th, 2021. It's a late summer day in rural North Carolina when Detective Tim Austin gets an unusual emergency call.
A call came into my desk that had been transferred from the communications center. Janelle Sparks is the sister-in-law of Lynn Sparks King, who lived in Linville Falls. She informed me that Lynn was 70 years old, had suffered from a traumatic brain injury in the past, and it had been about a month since anybody had talked to her, and she wanted somebody to go check on her.
According to Janelle, Lynn has disappeared before, but never for this long.
And the explanation from Janelle was that Lynn, she was an alcoholic in the past. She would go sometimes for a few weeks that nobody could get in touch with her. She was just that type of person. She did have a person living in her home that was helping take care of her.
Elizabeth Carserino was the live-in caretaker of Lynn King.
Janelle and her husband live in South Carolina, and the rest of the family lives in Florida. So it's been a blessing to have someone taking care of Lynn. But over a month ago, Elizabeth told them Lynn had unexpectedly left town.
According to Elizabeth, some friends had drove up from Louisiana, and they had partied, gotten drunk at the home, and the next morning Lynn decided that she wanted to go to Louisiana with her friends. My biggest fear was that if she had suffered from a traumatic brain injury in the past, and she's out here driving, she's consuming alcohol, she's with people, could they possibly do something to her? Could she lose control because of her age and her health concerns? We have to get everything out there that we can to try to find her. Every description of what she could be driving, who she could be with, what clothing she was wearing. So I started learning more about Lynn from her family. Time is our enemy, and we've got to work as fast as we can to try to locate her in a timely manner for her safety.
Lynn Sparks was born June 17, 1951, in Pinellas County, Florida. She and her older brother Butch were raised by a single mother.
Her mom, Wanda, was divorced from her dad, Jack. Lynn and Wanda were very, very close, almost more like sisters than mother and daughter. Lynn had a very adventurous personality. We both belonged to the swim club, so we would go and swim and carry on with all our friends.
In her early 20s, Lynn moved to the Florida Keys and worked as a bartender. There, she met Russell Keene, a businessman and father of 3.
Russell Keene was a very eccentric man. At the time that Lynn met my father-in-law, he was already in the process of going through a brutal divorce. He had all these wild and crazy ideas and aspirations, and a lot of them he put to fruition. He owned several Pizza Huts, a couple radio stations. He had a hotel down in the Turks and Caicos.
Russell was a bit older than Lynn was. She was truly in love with him.
By the time Russell's divorce was finalized, he'd lost most of his assets. So he and Lynn moved to North Carolina, where they lived in a home owned by Russell's father.
He never went back to work. He was too distraught. He felt like a failure and couldn't get past it. Lynn was the one that went waitressing at Louise's in order to make money for them to live off of. She was a trooper, but they were a pretty good, loving family, like any family with hardships.
Lynn got along well with Russell's adult children, especially his son Russ and his wife Kristen.
I remember the first time I went up to meet Lynn and Russell. It was such a warm welcome. It really was. I mean, Lynn was just such a sweet person and really kind of took me in. You know, she never had children. She kind of looked at Russ and I like her children.
But in 2001, Kristen's husband Russ was killed in the September 11th terrorist attacks.
Kind of was in a daze. And that's when mine and Lynn's relationship really started to grow. She was a sounding board for me. We all cried together a lot. It brought us closer. She was so close to my daughter. They both shared the love of reading, and they would go to the bookstore together. She's the one who got Masley her first library card. They had a very close relationship.
In 2016, the family was struck by more tragedy when Lynn's husband Russell passed away and her mother's health began to fail.
Lynn was, kind of helping her out around the house, although I think it got to be a little too much for her, and that's how Elizabeth came in the picture.
Elizabeth lived across the street, and they said she was, very good to Wanda, taking care of Wanda.
Lynn was like, Wanda needs more support. I can't really lift her. And Elizabeth was a strong person, so it seemed to be a good fit.
4 years later, in 2020, Wanda passed away when Lynn was 69 years old, which is when her problems with alcohol seemed to begin.
Lynn was having a really rough time. When Wanda passed, it was really hard for her. She's lost her husband, now she's lost her mother. It was tough.
When Lynn visited Kristen and her daughter in Florida that November, it became clear how bad things had gotten.
Something wakes me up at 4:45 in the morning, and I'm hearing music out on the pool deck, and I'm like, what is going on? So I open up the door, and it's Lynn, and she's having fun. She starts walking up the stairs of the pool deck to try to come talk to me. Well, she loses her balance, and she falls. She fell over the planter, smacked her head on the pool deck, bleeding, and she's unconscious. I'm talking to 911, I'm trying to compress on her head, and they come get her. Doctor says, look, you had a brain bleed. She needed to be on supervision because she could get dizzy. She had a concussion.
When Lynn returned to North Carolina, Elizabeth Carserino moved into the house to care for her full-time in exchange for room and board.
Elizabeth understood the situation. Lynn was buying all the food, provided a house over her head. The next 6 months, Lynn was healing. She'd go to bed at like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, try to sleep through what would be her drinking time. So she wouldn't do that anymore. And she got clean. When she got the all clear, I had been looking at river cruises. Go see new things and enjoy your life, live a little. Lynn was excited.
But now, it's been over 1 month since Kristen has heard from her mother-in-law, Lynn Keene, and North Carolina police are on their way to the house to check on her.
Myself and 3 other detectives, we loaded up in 2 different cars and rode out to Linville Falls. Jhene, Lynn's sister-in-law, had told me that there shouldn't be anybody at the home. Elizabeth had already informed them that Lynn told her to move out. I went up there, knocked and announced several times, found that the door knob, it was locked. The curtains were closed. I was told that there was a Lincoln Town car that Lynn drives, and it was not in the driveway. There was some building materials for the wheelchair ramp that was under construction. Wood and some bags of what is called concrete mix. Nothing appeared like there had been a breaking and entering or any kind of violent crime. This looked like a home that somebody was actively living in, that they just weren't home at that time. And I saw no reason to go inside the house. Because of her health issues and the fact that the family hasn't heard from her, I went back to the office and have her entered as a missing, endangered person.
Detective Austin also reaches out to Lynn's caretaker, Elizabeth Carserino.
I called at least 2 times trying to get in touch with Elizabeth and only got voicemail. I left my name and number and information that I needed to talk to her. She may be the last person to see Lynn. I also have 2 unknown friends, a Karen and an unknown male, and Lynn took off to Louisiana, so I'm beginning to get worried. Could something have happened to them?
Coming up, the search for Lynn Keene raises new concerns.
We were all upset with Lynn, disappointed in the fact that she fell off the wagon.
And detectives find answers buried in the dark.
I'm following my nose, and the smell of something decomposing is getting stronger the further I go.
Are you saying I did this?
I'm saying you know about it.
70-year-old Lynn Keene hasn't been heard from in over a month, and North Carolina police are unable to reach her caretaker, Elizabeth Carserino. Detectives call Lynn's daughter-in-law, Kristen Keene, to ask if she's heard from Elizabeth. She tells them Elizabeth moved out after Lynn left town.
Elizabeth Carserino had been in contact for probably a month with Kristen Keene, but Elizabeth had not contacted law enforcement. She tells Kristen, hey, I'm not at the house anymore. I'm camping with my son up in Maggie Valley.
Elizabeth said, I'll try to reach back out when I have signal, but I'm not going to be always available. Elizabeth told me some of Lynn's barfly friends from Louisiana had popped in. They brought in alcohol, and Elizabeth said, well, I tried to tell her Lynn's not drinking anymore, and she wouldn't listen to me, and she said, I just went to bed. She goes, but the next morning when I woke up, Lynn asked me to go to the pharmacy for her and get some things, and I said, why? And she said, because I'm going to Louisiana.
She didn't know who these people were. It kind of heightened how she was feeling about it.
We were all upset with Lynn, disappointed in the fact that she fell off the wagon, and she had done so well. I even left her some messages like, Lynn, honey, I really need to talk to you to make sure you're okay. At that stage in her life, it was a lot for her to take off and just go somewhere. And we're like, what in the world is going on? None of this makes sense.
Due to the fact that Lynn mentioned traveling to Louisiana, detectives put out a bolo for her vehicle along the route from North Carolina.
On August 2nd, I was notified by the Cherokee Police Department that the car was found in Cherokee, North Carolina. They had that vehicle towed to their secure lot. They found the keys to the vehicle under the driver's seat. There was nobody in the vehicle. Nothing stood out to them other than There was a Wells Fargo bank card in the car that was in the name of Lynn Keene. There was a Social Security card as well underneath the driver's seat. That Social Security card belonging to Lynn Keene. Bank records showed that her card had been used in Marion, North Carolina, and had been used in Cherokee, North Carolina, both times to fill up for gas at 2 different gas stations. It is starting to worry me because most people would not just leave their bank card, their Social Security card, as well as their car keys all locked up inside their vehicle.
Further analysis of the traffic recordings reveals another clue.
The Cherokee Tribal Police were able to find video of Lynn's car coming through town, and it appeared to be just occupied by one person, but the video was very grainy and couldn't make it out exactly who it was. The person driving the vehicle didn't look like Lynn. They looked like a bigger body type. What's going on in my mind is, if Lynn's not there, where did she go? Where did the people go that were with Lynn?
Police had not conducted a search of Lynn's house during their initial wellness check, but now they believe there is cause to do so.
Based on this, I did apply for a search warrant. In the interim, I've received a call from Kristen that she actually had a friend go into the home.
I had a friend that was a former detective in Tennessee. I called them up. I said, find a way in. I don't care. He went in the house. He said it reeked of incense. There was, a couple items that looked like somebody had just been there. He goes, when I went down into the basement, there were just a ton of flies. When he said flies, I just felt so sick to my stomach.
Four days after Lynn Keene was reported missing, her daughter-in-law, Kristen Keene, is informing investigators about the new concerning details in Lynn's home. But the call is interrupted by Lynn's caretaker.
Kristen told me she was getting a call waiting from Elizabeth. So I said, take the call me back, let me know what she says. Shortly after that, Kristen calls me back and tells me that Elizabeth is very angry with her.
She got really angry at me because she felt I was accusing her of doing something to Lynn. I told her, Elizabeth, I said, not for nothing. You are the last person to see Lynn, alive as we know it, because nobody's seen her since. You're going to be the first person that the police want to talk to.
Kristen says that it's just very unlike Elizabeth the way she was acting. She was acting guilty of something. What's going on in my head is I need to find Elizabeth. I need to speak with her because her story of what she has told the family is not adding up.
As their calls to Elizabeth Carserino continue to go unanswered, detectives return to Lynn's home with a search warrant.
There was nothing visual to the naked eye. I mean, everything appeared to be very tidy. There was no indicators that any kind of struggle or anything had taken place in that house.
I checked the main floor of the home, and then I see a doorway that I don't know where it goes. Well, I open this door, and immediately I'm hit with a very strong odor of something dead. There's also very large flies. And so I start making my way down the stairs of this home. Flies are everywhere. And the smell of something decomposing is getting stronger the further I go. I walk into this back room, and off in the corner I see a pile of something covered with a tarp and a box sitting on top of it. I remove the box, set it off the side, and I pull the tarp back. What I see is something, it looks like a big mound of concrete. And sitting on top of it is a bag of pre-mixed concrete mix. And the smell is just overwhelming. And I can see mixed on the edges of the concrete what looks like a human shoulder, hair. I've got a crime scene. I don't know who's in the concrete. I think it's Lynn. I immediately call for assistance from other investigators. I request the assistance of the North Carolina State Bureau of Investigation, and I start taping off the area.
The North Carolina Bureau of Investigation sends Special Agent Maggie Holder to the crime scene. Her first challenge is how to remove the body for identification.
I was a little intimidated trying to figure out, what's the best way to do this and preserve the body to make sure that we can send the body to autopsy.
They start chiseling away at the concrete. They proved it was a human being. Could not see a face. I could see parts of arms. I could see the thighs, parts of the calf. Very decomposed. Around the neck, I can see a belt that is tight, as in this person's been strangled.
While it's clear a murder has been committed, there is little else in the home to explain how or when it happened.
Initially, on the first crime scene search, it was not apparent that there was any blood or anything.
After investigators leave the scene, they call Lynn's loved ones. They are devastated when they learn of the discovery.
I kind of had already tried to prepare myself for the worst. I was sitting on the couch with my daughter in the living room, and Tim Austin called. He said, "Kristen, I'm certain that's her in the basement. Of course, we have to do autopsy and everything, but based on her hair, it's her."
Lynn and I were so close that it just absolutely broke my heart when I heard what had happened to her.
My daughter and I just start crying, and we just start sobbing. I mean, just like, you don't ever want that to be true.
And their suspicion of Elizabeth Carserino continues to grow.
Elizabeth Carserino avoided contacting law enforcement. It clearly showed that she was trying to avoid us.
The day after finding the body, Detective Austin uncovers more incriminating evidence.
I was able to find in Marion, North Carolina, that the store where the gas was purchased did have video.
When he reviews the footage from July 29th, a month after Lynn was last seen, he spots a familiar face.
It was not Lynn. In the video, Elizabeth is coming to the store, driving Lynn's car, pulling into the gas pumps, using a card to get gas. And in my head, I'm putting it together that Elizabeth's supposed to be in Maggie Valley. All of Lynn's stuff is found in Cherokee, and we're talking about two areas that are less than 30 minutes apart. I've got Elizabeth driving Lynn's car, and I've got Elizabeth using Lynn's bank card. We had nothing saying that Lynn ever gave her permission to use this. So I went before a magistrate who issued a warrant for Elizabeth Carserino's arrest. It started going through my mind of how could Lynn have been taken to the basement? Could one person have carried her, or is there somebody else involved? I needed those questions answered.
From there, I began working on a phone order in order to get up on Elizabeth Carserino's cell phone to see where she was in real time. And so at that point, I knew we had to find Elizabeth fast.
North Carolina investigators have collected evidence suggesting Elizabeth Carserino murdered her former patient, Lynn Keene. While the search for Elizabeth continues, detectives take a closer look at her background.
Elizabeth Catherine Carserino, born August 6, 1968. Her parents were Mary and Carl Smith, and she did have a brother named Johnny. She was raised in Goose Creek, South Carolina, just outside Charleston.
We did find out that she had spent some time in Utahville, South Carolina. She did have 3 children, 2 boys and a girl, and one of her sons she had just reconnected with and was trying to forge a relationship. The other son was incarcerated, and the daughter did not have anything to do with her. Elizabeth Carserino had no type of medical training. She was basically just a layman caretaker.
I think that her friendship with Wanda was kind, and so she wanted to help and just said she could be the caretaker. Elizabeth was kind enough, but she was definitely a very direct person. She seemed a little nervous around me.
The only times that in her criminal history that she had any type of trouble was writing bad checks. She had been charged with several.
Nothing in Elizabeth's record indicates she would be capable of committing such a gruesome crime. So investigators focus on tracking her down for questioning.
She said that she was traveling with her son and camping in Maggie Valley with him. And we needed to make sure that Elizabeth's son had nothing to do with Lynn going missing. And we were able to determine that he lives in Georgia.
When agents with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation interview Elizabeth's son, he claims to know nothing about Lynn's murder.
We got up on the phone line. His phone never left the state of Georgia, and he was also very cooperative throughout the investigation.
Detectives conclude Elizabeth's son had nothing to do with Lynn's murder and rule him out as a potential suspect. He informs detectives he last saw his mother less than a year ago.
It was determined that he really didn't have a lot to do with her.
On August 5th, 2 days after the body was removed from Lynn Keene's house, the medical examiner conducts an autopsy.
Dental records were provided which belonged to Lynn Keene and were matched to the body to confirm that that was in fact Lynn.
According to the pathologist, the preliminary cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head and ligature strangulation, and it would be in that order. She was struck with some object in the head, causing a big head injury, but did not kill her. Ligature strangulation came second, and that is what killed her.
Investigators now have a positive identification, cause of death, and a prime suspect, but they are no closer to bringing her in.
We were able to find a couple of photographs of Elizabeth. We put this out that she was wanted.
On August 6th, they discover why Elizabeth has been so difficult to track down.
There was a nurse at a hospital that actually saw the picture of Elizabeth and recognized her as a patient of hers that was currently in the hospital.
Detectives are informed that Elizabeth was admitted 2 days earlier on August 4th.
It was relayed to me through Cherokee Tribal Police that she was in a campground staying in a tent in Cherokee, North Carolina, which was actually only a few hundred yards from where the car was abandoned.
She had left the vehicle and walked on foot to a campground and had been camping in a tent. She took some Tylenol PM and slit her wrist trying to take her own life. To me, that is showing that she's feeling very guilty for something, but definitely something traumatic has happened.
Local law enforcement in Silva were able to arrest Elizabeth at the medical facility where she was transferred from their custody to the Avery County Sheriff's Office.
Your first thought is, okay, I've got to get this person to talk to me. This was just such an egregious way to murder someone, and I just wanted to know what happened.
Coming up, police confront Elizabeth about what exactly happened to Lynn Keene.
What did she do to you to get you over that breaking?
I don't know what to say to you.
She tried to use the old amnesia thing. I think she was distancing herself from the crime.
And Lynn's loved ones seek justice for her terrifying murder.
And we're both trying to play back this whole thing in our head. Like, how could we have missed that?
On August 7th, 4 days after the body of Lynn Keene was found in her basement, investigators questioned the suspected killer, Elizabeth Carserino.
My goal at the time was to establish a rapport to get her to open up to talk to us. And then to be able to use those facts that she gives me to establish a motive.
When was the last time you talked with Miss Lynn?
The last time I spoke to her, she was supposedly in Louisiana. She was coming back with some friends. Don't know who the people are. Only know what the one girl's first name is.
Well, I got some information I want to share with you.
Okay.
Lynn is dead.
Don't tell me that.
Oh, yeah.
And whenever he tells her that, she puts her hands over her face and just, acts really surprised and starts sort of crying.
While Elizabeth appears saddened by the news of Lynn's death, she says caring for the woman had been a challenge.
I was constantly cleaning up everything. Of course, she didn't remember that because she was drunk. She yelled at me and told me that she might as well pay somebody to clean the house because I don't do a damn thing but sit on my ass. And that pissed me off to no end because I did absolutely everything. I went and bought all the groceries. I put everything up. I did all the cooking. I did all the cleaning. I did all the laundry. I even put her clothes up for her.
And nothing was never good enough.
When she got to that point, no, it wasn't.
What did she do to you to get you over that breaking?
Are you saying I did this?
I'm saying you know about it.
I don't know what to say to you if I can't remember right this moment. I don't know what to say.
You want to go take a walk?
Sure.
After a break for Elizabeth to regain her composure, investigators try questioning her again.
We know you're human. We're human. We make mistakes. But we do have a job to do.
I do understand.
And you did this. You killed Lynn and you left her in that house.
And it went back and forth that she just couldn't remember the details and what had happened. So then there come a point in time within the interview that I kind of changed my role and got more aggressive with her.
You got tired of her and you killed her. Did you not kill her? Look at me. Look at me and be honest with me.
I am being honest.
You killed her, didn't you?
Yes, I killed her. I can't get it out of my head.
That's right.
I can't get it out what I did.
Elizabeth refuses to go into detail, but her actions after leaving Lynn's house show investigators she went to great lengths attempting to cover it up.
Elizabeth is smart and knew to call Kristen multiple times and put her on a different trail, like Karen in Louisiana going down with friends. She knew to bring up that she went to Maggie Valley with her son. She thought, hey, I'm going to have time to get my story straight.
As for motive, they believe the growing tension between the two women finally became too much for Elizabeth to take.
According to Elizabeth Carserino, Lynn was very restricted about where she could go, what she could do, that it was pretty much she had to be 24/7 with Lynn. And I believe that over a period of time that anger and resentment and rage built up, and I think that maybe on this particular day, I think that Elizabeth lost her temper.
She snaps on her and hits her over the head. Instead of calling 911 of, oh God, I've messed up, I've hurt her, let's get her some help. She put a belt around her neck and took her life. I spoke with the district attorney, and he felt it appropriate to go ahead and have a warrant issued for Elizabeth for the crime of murder.
So you've got them in custody. So there is some highs, there is still some lows, because you still got a lot of work to do. This case has got to be presented in a court of law, and you're trying to make sure everything is tied up to where that this is going to be a winnable case.
After a week of investigation, Elizabeth Carserino is arrested and charged with the murder of 70-year-old Lynn Keene.
They called us right away, and it was like, we got her. We got her. I'm crying like a baby, and Lynn's brother, just devastated. First he lost his mom, and now his sister, so horribly, and Janelle too, and we're both trying to play back this whole thing in our head, like, how could we have missed that?
Like investigators, Lynn's loved ones are frustrated by Elizabeth's refusal to explain the whole truth.
She claims to have had amnesia, can't remember anything. BS. I call BS. She's lying.
The family's resentment is intensified by the amount of time it takes to bring Elizabeth to justice.
Elizabeth's attorney died, and so we had to wait. It took 2.5 years to even get to trial.
In January 2024, the long-awaited day finally comes.
I was there for that day. I was sitting in the front row, and in walks Elizabeth right through the door. She looks at me and then quickly looks away. Looks could kill.
I was told she had an option, plead guilty. It would be easier, and she might get less time.
Rather than go to trial, Elizabeth decides to plead guilty. At her sentencing hearing, prosecutors present new evidence for the court to take into consideration.
The crime scene agent who initially processed the scene on August 3rd, he returned and performed something called Blue Star. Blue Star is like luminol, basically a liquid chemical mixture that we use to look for blood that has either been cleaned up or there's small amounts of blood that can't be seen with the naked eye. Sprayed it within the master bedroom area, and it fluoresced quite a bit on the floor, on the bed, and in different areas within the residence. And that indicated to us that that is in fact probably where the initial assault occurred, and then likely murder there.
Prosecutors believe Elizabeth used the belt to drag Lynn down to the basement, where she used the bags of concrete to attempt to hide the body.
She's telling the family these stories that some friends and Lynn took off to Louisiana, and Elizabeth packs everything she can. She goes to the store and buys several things using Lynn's bank card, and she goes on the run.
To kill this woman that you had taken care of, and for the next month, lie to her family while her body is decomposing in the basement. It's pretty sick.
Lynn's loved ones add personal statements requesting Elizabeth receive the maximum sentence under the law.
My impact statement was mostly to let everybody know who Lynn was and how wonderful she was. None of us are perfect, but her heart and her soul, she was a wonderful person. She was caring, she was giving, she was kind. I wanted them to know about her. And the last part of my impact statement was directed mostly towards Elizabeth, and that she was lying, how evil she was. How could you live in a house where you murdered someone and they're rotting downstairs in the basement below you for almost 2 months? It's insane to me.
On January the 5th, 2024, Elizabeth Carserino was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
I'm a spiritual person. Like, I talk to Lynn every day. There is not a day that goes by that I don't think about her. Kind of like my husband, you know? I might not see them, but they're still here with me in spirit. Lynn was just a fun-loving, free spirit. She was kind. She was generous. I mean, in this day and age, when a lot of people have forgotten what kindness is, I mean, yeah, it's a loss. She never met a stranger.
She blamed her horrific actions on the drugs. I tell you, drugs might cloud your judgment, but they do not manufacture malice. That rot was already inside her. In June 2010, a jury found James Cornhart and Stephen Mueller guilty of first-degree murder and conspiracy. They were sentenced to life in prison. Dozer is still out there, a ghost waiting for his own shadow to catch up with him. Karen Coleman received 20 years in federal prison for her cooperation, 20 years for orchestrating the brutal execution of the father of her child. Her son, Joby, refused to be in the courtroom to hear his mother detail how she slaughtered his father. The heartbreak that boy must carry is unimaginable. Danny Coleman was a decent man who loved the wrong woman. He worked hard, he cared for his family, and he was totally blindsided by the person who slept next to him every night. Justice was delayed for nearly 2 decades, but it was not denied. We speak for the dead because they cannot speak for themselves. And sometimes we have to wait a very long time for the dead to finally get the peace they deserve. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine. Love, hate, and the most common of them all, a few pieces of silver. I tell you, when you look into the abyss of human greed, it stares right back at you with empty eyes. It was October 22nd, 1992, just past 9 o'clock in the evening in Stanton, Missouri, a quiet farming community where people usually mind their own business. A motorist driving down the road sees a glow in the distance. A vehicle engulfed in flames in the middle of a desolate field. Firefighters arrive to douse the inferno and make a discovery that turns a quiet night into a nightmare. A body in the front passenger seat, burned beyond recognition. Fire is a destroyer's secrets, but it rarely destroys them all. We found skeletal remains, a gold chain, a ring, a watch, and a hunting belt buckle. But the dead man left us one undeniable signature. A metal rod surgically implanted in his right leg. The killers thought they were clever. They removed the license plates to delay the inevitable. You have to be kidding me. Criminals are rarely as smart as they think they are. They forgot the vehicle identification number etched right into the metal frame of the truck. That number led straight to a St. Louis address belonging to a man named Danny Coleman. Danny was 38 years old, an Army veteran who took a bad spill on a motorcycle back in 1971, earning him that metal rod in his leg. By all accounts, Danny was a good man, a straight shooter who taught children gun safety, a mechanical engineer who worked hard to provide a comfortable life for his wife Karen and their 18-year-old son Joby. When investigators knocked on Karen's door at 2:30 in the morning, she played the part of the worried wife perfectly. Tears flowed when we mentioned the jewelry and the metal pen. But tears are cheap, and in my line of work, you learn to look past a performance. We looked into Danny's life. No enemies, no gambling debts, nothing. But when we dug into his loving wife Karen, the pristine facade began to rot. Karen was living a double life. While Danny was working his fingers to bone, Karen was deep into methamphetamine. She was dealing drugs and engaging in multiple extramarital affairs. Danny knew about the drugs and hated it. He was a decent man sleeping next to a viper. The medical examiner, Dr. Mary Case, looked at Danny's ruined skull. The fire did not kill Danny Coleman. He was beaten to death with something resembling a baseball bat. It was a vicious, angry end for a gentle soul. We scoured the crime scene and found a matchbook wrapped in cellophane. From that wrapper, we pulled a single latent fingerprint, a ghost waiting for a name. But the trail went cold. Years bled into one another. 1992 turned into 1998. You exhaust every lead, but you never forget the victim. Danny deserved justice. Then, in 1999, the Federal Bureau of Investigation gets a call from Missouri State Penitentiary. An armed robber named Larry Nolan was dying of hepatitis. But before the devil dragged him down, Larry made a deathbed confession to his cellmate. It turns out Karen Coleman had a habit of visiting Larry in prison. She manipulated him, seduced him, and promised him $15,000 and her hand in marriage if he arranged to have her husband killed. Danny had a $50,000 life insurance policy. Betraying a good man for blood money. Larry reached out to a buddy on the outside, a firefighter named James Cornhart. For $17,000, James agreed to do the devil's work. James brought in two more cowards, Stephen Mueller for $1,200, and a phantom known only as Dozer. On that fateful October night, they lured Danny to a vacant house under the pretense of giving him information about Karen's affairs. When Danny arrived, he was blindsided, beaten brutally and shot 3 times in the head with a pistol equipped with a silencer made from a lawnmower muffler. They dumped his body in his own truck, drove it to that lonely field, and set it on fire. Larry Nolan confessed because Karen never paid him and never married him. There is no honor among thieves. We verified the prison logs. Karen and James were both on Larry's visitor list. The medical examiner re-examined the bone fragments and found a lead snowstorm, confirming the gunshot wounds. But knowing the truth and proving in court are two entirely different animals. It took until 2008 to finally drop the hammer. Federal authorities arrested James Cornhart at his firehouse. We took his fingerprints and compared them to the latent print lifted from that cellophane wrapper. 16 years earlier. It was a perfect match. 16 years, and that ghost finally had a face. But criminals just cannot keep their mouths shut. Sitting in the county jail, James made a phone call to Stephen Mueller, begging him to dispose of the homemade silencer. We listened to every word. We brought Stephen in, and he cracked like an egg, confessing to everything and admitting he was the one who pulled the trigger. Facing the wall, Karen Coleman decided to save her own skin. She confessed to orchestrating the murder of the man who gave her everything, just so she could escape her marriage and fund her pathetic, drug-fueled existence. She sold out her co-conspirators without a second thought. In 2010, a jury found James and Stephen guilty of murder for hire. They received life in prison. Karen received 20 years. I tell you, 20 years is a light price for selling your soul. The man named Dozer is still out there somewhere, but his time will come. Danny Coleman was an asset to this world, a kind soul who was utterly betrayed by the woman who swore to love him. He died in the dark, surrounded by cowards, but his truth was finally brought into the light. Humans are peculiar creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine. I tell you, when you look into the abyss of human greed, you find absolute darkness. Danny Coleman was a good man. He was 38 years old, an Army veteran, a hard worker who built a successful flooring business, and a loving father. He spent his time teaching children how to handle hunting rifles safely. He was an asset to this world. And for his goodness, he was completely blindsided by the person he trusted most. It was a night of October 22nd, 1992. A motorist driving down Interstate 44 in Stanton, Missouri spots a fire in a remote field. Firefighters arrive to a blazing truck and make a gruesome discovery. A human body in the passenger seat, burned beyond recognition. The fire destroys almost everything. But fire is a funny thing. It consumes flesh and blood, but it cannot consume the truth. Investigators find a vehicle identification number on the steel frame. It traces back to Danny and Karen Coleman in St. Louis, 45 minutes away. Detectives knock on their door at 2:30 in the morning. They meet Karen and her 18-year-old son, Joby. Karen plays the part of concerned wife perfectly. She identifies a scorch belt buckle, a watch, and a ring. The medical examiner, Dr. Mary Case, confirms it is Danny through dental records and a metal rod in his right leg from an old motorcycle accident. The autopsy reveals a horrific truth. Danny was not just burned. His skull was crushed by blunt force trauma. Someone wanted him dead, and they wanted it to look like an accident. You start with the inner circle. The spouse is always the prime suspect. Karen claimed they had a loving marriage of 19 years. No enemies, no problems. But when you scratch the surface of a lie, the ugly truth bleeds out. Friends and acquaintances slowly reveal Karen was living a double life. She was heavily involved in using and dealing methamphetamines. She was having multiple extramarital affairs, even sleeping with her best friend husband. Danny hated the drugs. He was an honest, easygoing guy. If he knew the extent of her betrayal, he would have divorced her in a heartbeat. But Karen did not want a divorce. She wanted a payday. Despite the rumors, the case goes cold. Years pass. The killer thinks they got away with it. They always do. But secrets are heavy, and criminals are inherently stupid. In 1999, the Federal Bureau of Investigation gets a call from Missouri State Penitentiary. An inmate claims his former cellmate, a convicted armed robber named Larry Nolan, made a deathbed confession before dying of hepatitis. Larry confessed to setting up a murder in a rural Missouri field. Why did Larry confess? Because there is no honor among thieves. Karen had seduced Larry during prison visits. She manipulated him, promising marriage and $15,000 from Danny's $50,000 life insurance policy if Larry arranged the hit. Larry recruited his friend, a firefighter named James Cornhart, to do the dirty work. But after Danny was dead, Karen stopped visiting Larry. She never paid him. She dropped him like a bad habit. He felt double-crossed. My. Hell hath no fury like a hitman scorned. Investigators verify the prison visitor logs. Both Karen and James are on Larry's visitor list. The medical examiner reviews the bone fragments and finds a lead snowstorm. Microscopic shrapnel indicating Danny was also shot. But they need more evidence. Another 9 years pass. In 2008, federal authorities step in and arrest 49-year-old James Cornhart at his firehouse. When they fingerprint him, science delivers a fatal blow. They match his print to a latent fingerprint left on a cellophane match wrapper found at the burned truck 16 years earlier. You have to be kidding me. You commit a brutal murder, and you leave your fingerprint on the very matches you used to burn the evidence. I tell you, criminals are their own worst enemies. James makes a phone call from the county jail to a friend named Stephen Mueller, asking him to dispose of a homemade silencer crafted from a lawnmower muffler. Investigators track down Stephen. He cracks under pressure and confesses everything. He admits that he, James, and a mystery man known only as Dozer lured Danny to a vacant house under the guise of providing information about Karen affairs. They beat him, shot him 3 times, drove him to that field in his own truck, and set him on fire. They did this for a promised payout of $17,000 for James and $1,200 $100 for Stephen. Absolute cowardice. They destroyed a good man for pennies. Facing the wall, Karen finally turns on her accomplices to save her own skin. She admits she orchestrated the whole thing because she wanted to stop living a double life and wanted the insurance money. A truly cold and calculated monster. In June 2010, a jury finds James and Stephen guilty of murder for hire. They receive life sentences. Karen gets 20 years in federal prison for her cooperation. Frankly, she deserves to rot in a cell for the rest of her life. She is the one who put the target on her husband back. The man known as Dozer is still out there. But the universe has a way of balancing the scales. The law never forgets, and the truth always rises from the ashes. Danny Coleman was a victim of immense greed, but his son Joby finally got some justice. And Danny's memory remains an enduring testament to the good men who walk among us. Humans are curious creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can possibly imagine. I tell you, I have spent decades wading through the darkest corners of the human soul. And it never ceases to amaze me how little a human life is worth to someone consumed by greed and selfishness. It is the 22nd of October, 1992, just after 9 o'clock in the evening. A motorist driving down a quiet rural road in Stanton, Missouri, sees a glow in the distance. Fire. A burning truck in the middle of a desolate, rolling field. Firefighters arrive to put out the blaze and make a grim discovery. A body, burned beyond recognition, sitting in the passenger seat. The fire was meant to destroy everything. The killers even removed the license plates. But fire is a funny thing. It consumes flesh and bone, but it leaves behind metal. Investigators find a vehicle identification number etched into the frame of the truck. They find a belt buckle from a hunting group, a watch, a gold ring, and most importantly, a surgical metal rod in the right leg of the victim. My. You think you are a criminal mastermind, setting a fire in the dark woods to cover your tracks. But you forget the very basic principles of identification. The truck belongs to Danny Coleman, a 38-year-old mechanical engineer from St. Louis. Danny was a good man, an Army veteran who had a pin in his leg from a motorcycle accident years prior, a man who volunteered to teach children how to safely handle firearms. He was a loving father to his 18-year-old son. He was a husband. He was by all accounts decent. And in the world of homicide, decent people often become prey for the wicked. The medical examiner takes a look at Danny. The fire did not kill him. His skull was crushed. Blunt force trauma. And later, they would find something else hidden in the bone fragments. A lead snowstorm in his skull. The telltale signs of a bullet-shattering bone. They beat him and they shot him. Absolute overkill. It tells me one thing immediately. This was not a robbery gone wrong. This was personal. When you work a homicide, you start at the center and work your way out. The center is the home. Danny was married to Karen Coleman for 19 years. They met when he was recovering from his accident in a military hospital. A sweet story, right? Wrong. Karen was living a double life. While Danny was working hard, building a flooring business, and providing a comfortable life for his family, Karen was sinking into the dark world of methamphetamine. She was having affairs. She was a hollow shell of a human being, hiding behind the facade of a suburban housewife. Danny knew she was dealing drugs, and he despised it. Their marriage was crumbling. But Karen knew Danny had a life insurance policy worth $50,000, and in her twisted, drug-addled mind. That money was her ticket out. The case stalls. Years pass. The killers think they've gotten away with it. They always do. But secrets are heavy burdens, and criminals are inherently stupid. In 1999, a phone call comes in from Missouri State Penitentiary. A convicted armed robber named Larry Nolan had died of hepatitis in 1996. But before he took his last breath, he confessed a story to his cellmate. You see, Karen Coleman had been visiting Nolan in prison. She manipulated him. She used her charm to wrap a convicted felon around her finger. She promised to marry him and pay him $15,000 if he arranged to have her husband killed. Nolan felt betrayed because, after Danny was dead, Karen stopped visiting and never paid him a single dime. Honor among thieves? You have to be kidding me. Through Nolan, Karen found James Cornhart, a local firefighter, a man who saves lives for a living, willing to take one for $17,000. Cornhart roped in a buddy named Stephen Mueller for a measly $1,200, and an unknown phantom they called Dozer. They lured Danny to a vacant house under the pretense of giving him information about his wife having an affair. When Danny arrived, seeking the truth about his broken marriage, they ambushed him. They beat him, shot him with a homemade silencer crafted from a lawnmower muffler, drove him out to a field, and burned him in his own truck. They thought they were ghosts. But remember the crime scene? Investigators found a matchbook wrapped in cellophane near the burned truck. And on that cellophane was a single latent fingerprint. It sat locked in an evidence room for 16 years. In 2008, federal authorities arrest Cornhart. They roll his fingers. The print is a perfect match. 16 years later, the ghost has a name and a set of fingerprints. Cornhart makes a panic phone call from jail to his buddy Mueller, begging him to throw the homemade silencer off a bridge. A recorded jail phone call. I tell you, the sheer stupidity of these people is an absolute gift to law enforcement. Mueller cracks and confesses. Karen Coleman is backed into a corner, facing federal murder for hire charges. She finally flips. The loving wife who orchestrated Asian. As the crime scene technicians process the apartment, they discovered a series of curious items left in plain view. On the living room coffee table sat a plate containing crushed prescription pills, arranged as if someone had intended to snort them. Nearby, a partially smoked marijuana cigarette lay in an ashtray. Most intriguing of all was a light blue bandana carefully wrapped around a beer bottle left on the counter. In many urban areas, a colored bandana left at a crime scene serves as a calling card for local street gangs, a way of claiming responsibility for the act or intimidating rivals. It looked like a gang-related incident, one of the lead detectives noted. Studying the blue bandana, Arlington has some active Vietnamese gangs, and they have been known to extort local businesses. It seemed like they were leaving their colors to take credit. Yet, as the detective stood in the middle of the chaotic living room, a sense of skepticism began to take root. The scene felt almost too deliberate, the clues too neatly arranged for a reel. Chaotic home invasion. Experienced investigators know that criminals rarely leave such convenient, textbook evidence behind unless they want it to be found. Sometimes things seem too perfect, the detective mused. Most gang members don't do violent crimes of this specific nature against elderly citizens in their own homes without a very specific reason. We began to theorize that this entire scene was staged to throw us off the real track. Voices of the community. While the forensic team continued their meticulous sweep of the apartment, collecting hair fibers, DNA swabs, and processing the miles of duct tape for fingerprints, detectives began interviewing the family and neighbors gathered outside. The Vietnamese community in Arlington was deeply rocked by the news. Long and Hong were beloved figures, known for their kindness, their dedication to their family, and their gentle presence. They were a very nice couple, a neighbor whispered, tears shining in her eyes. They never bothered anyone. Everyone loved them. I don't think they had a single enemy in the world. The detectives focused their initial inquiries on Chow Tran, who, as the primary English speaker, acted as the spokesperson for the grieving family. Chow was visibly distraught, his face pale as he sat with investigators to recount the events of the previous evening. He walked them through the timeline of the birthday celebration, confirming that Long and Hong had been in high spirits, enjoying the company of their grandchildren until they left the party around 10:30. When asked about the family business, Chow admitted that the sewing shop had been struggling significantly over the past year, but he insisted that he could not conceive of any connection between their financial difficulties and this horrific act. He explained that while Vietnamese families sometimes kept cash at home due to traditional distrust of formal banking institutions, his in-laws did not possess large sums of money that would attract such a violent robbery. No one would want to harm them, Chow pleaded, shaking his head. They were sweet, generous, and hardworking. This makes no sense. The detectives listened carefully, taking detailed notes and collecting DNA and fingerprint samples from Chow and the other family members to rule them out as suspects, a standard procedure in any major investigation. The whisper of the windfall. On June 11, 2012, the detectives attended the autopsy of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu at the Tarrant County Medical Examiner's office. The findings of the medical examiner were both tragic and deeply illuminating. While both victims had suffered significant blunt force trauma to the head, the coroner revealed that the physical blows were not the actual cause of death. Instead, the autopsy showed that Hong's face had been wrapped in approximately 25 feet of heavy duct tape, while Long's face had been wrapped in 10 feet of tape. They had died of suffocation. The realization of the sheer physical and mental suffering the couple endured in their final moments weighed heavily on the seasoned investigators. It was clear that the primary intent of the attackers was not merely to incapacitate them during a robbery, but to ensure they did not survive. The extensiveness of the duct tape tells us everything, a detective explained. This wasn't a robbery gone bad. The whole point, the absolute goal, was to kill the victims. This felt deeply personal. As the detectives walked back to their vehicle, their phones rang. It was an unexpected call from a major life insurance company. The representative on the line explained that they were calling routinely to report a significant policy held in the names of the deceased. Because the policy was for a substantial amount, totaling at least $1 million, it triggered an automatic notification to law enforcement in the event of a homicide. The detective's eyebrows raised as he listened to the details. "And who," he asked, his pen poised over his notepad, "are the designated beneficiaries of this policy?" The voice on the other end of the line was clear. "The primary beneficiary listed is their son-in-law, Chow Tran." The shadow of doubt. The discovery of the $1 million life insurance policy cast a completely new light on the investigation. In the world of homicide detective work, a financial windfall of that magnitude immediately requires close scrutiny of those closest to the victims. On June 13, 2012, detectives invited Chow Tran back to the Arlington police station for a follow-up conversation. They kept the tone conversational, asking him about the business structure and the newly discovered insurance policies. Chow did not deny the existence of the policies. He explained that because the sewing business was registered in his in-laws' names, the family had taken out the insurance to ensure that the business could continue to operate and support the extended family if one of them were to pass away. It was, he argued, a standard protective measure for a family-owned enterprise. When asked about his coordinates during the estimated time of the murders, between midnight and the early hours of June 10th, Chow provided a detailed and consistent timeline. He and his family had remained at home sleeping after the party, a claim that was supported by other members of the household. Furthermore, the preliminary forensic reports began to arrive from the laboratory. The DNA profiles extracted from the partially smoked marijuana cigarette and the swabs taken from The beer bottle did not match Chow Tran, nor did they match any other member of the immediate family. The profiles were run through the FBI's combined DNA index system, known as CODIS, which contains millions of DNA profiles from convicted offenders across the country. To the detectives' immense disappointment, the search returned no matches. It was a difficult moment, an investigator recalled. We had excellent physical evidence, a clear DNA profile from the stage scene, but if the person who left it had never been convicted of a felony, their profile wouldn't be in the system. We were looking for someone who had managed to stay under the radar, with no physical match and no direct evidence linking Chow to the physical act of the crime. The investigation began to slow. Detectives interviewed and swabbed over 50 to 60 people, including neighbors, business associates, and acquaintances within the community, but every path led to a dead end. The seasons changed, the years began to slip by, and the file on the murders of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu was carefully placed into the cabinet of unsolved cold cases. But the detectives who had stood in that quiet bedroom closet never forgot the sweet couple, and they quietly waited for the one piece of information that would bring the truth to light, the key in the database. The breakthrough did not arrive with a dramatic chase or a sudden confession, but with the quiet, automated chime of a computer terminal in the autumn of 2015, more than 3 years after the tragedy. In the state of Texas, an individual must be convicted of a felony offense for their DNA profile to be entered into the National CODIS database. In late 2015, a young man named Willie Guillory, who was 19 years old, was arrested and convicted of a felony charge involving the theft of a horse in Houston. Because horse theft is a felony under Texas law, Willie's DNA profile was legally collected and entered into the state database. Within 48 hours, the computer system completed a routine background comparison and flag occurred. The DNA profile of Willie Guillory was an exact match for the DNA found on the partially smoked marijuana cigarette left on the coffee table in Arlington back in June of 2012. When the notification landed on the desks of the Arlington homicide detectives, the cold case instantly roared back to life. They immediately pulled Willie Guillory's file. At the time of the murders in 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old, a minor with no prior adult record, which explained why his DNA had never appeared in the system during the initial investigation. It was the key we had been waiting for, a detective said, his voice filled with renewed determination. A kid from Houston, 16 years old at the time, has his DNA inside an apartment in Arlington on the night of a double homicide. That is not a coincidence. On October 17th, 2015, detectives located Willie Guillory. He was currently in violation of his parole for failing to check in with his officer. Using this violation as the legal basis, they took him into custody and brought him to the Arlington Police Department for a formal interview. The young man's story. The interview room was quiet as 2 experienced detectives sat across from 19-year-old Willie Guillory. Initially, Willie was defensive, insisting that he had never been to Arlington and knew nothing about any elderly couple or any crime. "I wasn't there," Willie muttered, looking at the floor. "I don't know nothing about no Arlington." The lead detective leaned forward, placing a copy of the forensic report on the table between them. He explained in calm, precise terms how DNA works, how it is unique to every single human being, and how a specific DNA had been recovered from a cigarette left inside a closed apartment where 2 people had lost their lives. As the reality of the situation settled over him, the young man's defenses began to crumble. The weight of a secret carried since he was 16 years old became too heavy to bear. Willie's shoulder began to shake, and he broke down, tears streaming down his face. "Yes," Willie sobbed, covering his face with his hands. "Yes, I was there. I did it, but I didn't do it alone. I didn't know it was going to go down like that." Willie explained that in the summer of 2012, he was a lost 16-year-old living under the influence of his uncle, 49-year-old Bobby Guillory. Willie looked up to his uncle and felt he had little choice but to follow his directions. According to Willie, on June 9, 2012, Bobby had approached him with a proposition. "You're going to come with me up to Arlington," Bobby had told him. "We got a job to do. Just help me out and you'll get taken care of." They made the 3-hour drive from Houston to Arlington in Bobby's car. Willie claimed that his uncle already possessed a physical key to the apartment of Long and Hong. The plan, Bobby explained, was to enter the apartment while the couple was out, search for valuables, and set up a scene to make it look like a local gang had committed a robbery. "My uncle told me to throw stuff around," Willie explained, wiping his eyes. "We brought the beer bottles, the blue bandana, the pills, and the weed. He wanted it to look like some thugs did it. I smoked a little bit of the cigarette and left it there. I didn't know." Willie then described the terrifying moment when the elderly couple returned home earlier than expected. Panicked, Willie ran toward the door to stop Hong from escaping or screaming, while Bobby grabbed Long, using a blunt object to quickly incapacitate him. Once the couple was subdued, Bobby directed Willie to help him bind them with duct tape and move them into the small bedroom, closet, where they were left as the two men fled back to Houston. The mastermind in the shadows. The detectives listened to Willie's confession with a mixture of intense focus and professional reserve. While the details of the physical act were now clear, the most critical question remained. Why would a middle-aged man and his teenage nephew from Houston travel 3 hours north of Target? An elderly Vietnamese couple they had never met? "Who told your uncle to do this, Willie?" the detective asked softly. "How did he get the key?" Willie looked up, his eyes red. "It was a lady named Daphne," he whispered. "Daphne Wright. I met her through my Uncle Bobby. She's at an office in Houston. She said some people owed her a lot of money, and they weren't paying up. She told my uncle, if they don't pay, I want them dead." The mention of Daphne Wright instantly connected the remaining pieces of the puzzle. The detectives remembered the name from their initial background research into the families. History. She was a spiritual advisor from Houston whom Chow and Hong had contacted years prior to help save their business. Willie claimed that Daphne was a true driving force behind the entire plot. She had provided Bobby with the physical key to the apartment and had promised a financial payout once the job was completed. "She used us," Willie said, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She knew we needed the money, and she used us to do her dirty work." With this extraordinary confession, Arlington police officially charged Willie Guillory with capital murder. But the investigation was far from over. They now had to secure the arrest of his uncle, Bobby Guillory, and uncover the full extent of the relationship between the spiritual advisor, her massive debt, and the grieving family in Arlington. The arrest of Bobby Guillory. On December 16th, 2015, a team of detectives traveled to Katy, Texas, a suburban community just west of Houston, to locate 52-year-old Bobby Guillory. Bobby was arrested without incident on 2 counts of capital murder. Initially, when placed in the interrogation room, Bobby maintained a stoic silence, refusing to answer questions or acknowledge his involvement. However, the detectives had secured a search warrant to collect his DNA profile to compare against secondary samples recovered from the crime scene, knowing that his nephew had already confessed and that scientific evidence would soon place him at the scene. Bobby's resolve began to soften. He looked at the detectives, his face reflecting a deep, heavy exhaustion. "I didn't want to hurt nobody," he said, his voice cracked with emotion. "When I put that tape, I was scared. I really was. I know what I did, and I'm still scared." Bobby, who had no prior criminal record before this incident, explained that in 2011, he had been laid off from his job. He was facing extreme financial desperation, struggling to keep a roof over his head and put food on the table. I was so desperate, so hungry. Bobby recalled, his hand shaking. I didn't want to end up on the street. I didn't know what to do. It was during this period of vulnerability that he met Daphne Wright through a mutual friend. Daphne, recognizing his financial desperation, offered him a way out. She promised to pay him $10,000 if he would travel to Arlington to take care of a couple who owed her a substantial debt. She told me I'd get $10,000, Bobby said. She was the one who dictated everything. She told us exactly what to do, how to make it look like a gang thing, and she gave me the key to get into the house. But when the detective asked how Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment, Bobby's answer sent a shockwave through the room. She told me she got it from the son-in-law. Bobby said directly, Chow Tran. She said he was the one who put the key under the mat for her. The ledger of curses. The allegation that Chow Tran had actively participated in conspiracy to end the lives of his own family members was a stunning turn in the case. The detectives had spent years working closely with Chow, viewing him as a grieving victim trying to hold his family together. To build a case that would stand up in a court of law, investigators focused their attention on Daphne Wright. On August 31st, 2016, detectives arrived at her Houston residence with an arrest warrant and a comprehensive search warrant for her home. Daphne lived with her husband, Howard, and their 3 daughters. She was clearly the matriarch of the household, a loud, direct, and commanding woman who ran her home with an iron hand. When initially questioned about Chow Tran, she admitted he was a client of her spiritual practice, but refused to discuss any financial arrangements or specific services she had rendered. What happens when someone doesn't pay you, Daphne? The detective asked, observing her cold, calm demeanor. Daphne looked him directly in the eye, her expression unreadable. Oh, they will pay, she replied softly. I have no doubt about that. During the search of her home, investigators discovered a crucial piece of physical evidence, a detailed ledger documenting her spiritual business. The pages were filled with names, dates, and astronomical fees charged for various spiritual services. There were listings for blessings, protections, and complex rituals designed to remove or apply curses, with prices ranging from $10,000 to $40,000 per service. It was a highly organized, highly lucrative enterprise built entirely on the deep beliefs and vulnerabilities of her clients. As Daphne was taken into custody, detectives interviewed her husband, Howard. Howard was entirely cooperative, expressing complete shock at the allegations and maintaining that he had no knowledge of his wife's involvement in any criminal conspiracy. This is the very first time I'm hearing any of this, Howard said, his voice filled with genuine bewilderment. I had no idea. The deal with the devil. With Daphne, Bobby, and Willie all in custody, prosecutors faced a complex legal challenge. While they had physical evidence and confessions linking the Guillory men to the physical act of the crime, proving that Daphne Wright had orchestrated and funded the hit required direct, inside testimony. They turned their attention back to Chow Tran. By subpoenaing his financial records, investigators discovered that in the years following the deaths of Long and Hong, Chow had purchased a beautiful new home while the sewing business was permanently closed. Knowing that the state held powerful evidence of his involvement, Chow's attorney approached prosecutors to discuss a potential agreement. Chow was willing to share the complete story of the family's relationship with Daphne, but only in exchange for legal protections. In a formal proffer session, Chow described the intense psychological control Daphne had exerted over their family. He explained that as their debts grew to nearly $280,000, they became absolutely terrified of her. We believed she had real spiritual powers, Chow explained, his voice trembling. If she could remove a curse, she could also put a terrible curse on us. She told us she would get her money one way or another. According to Chow, the pressure became so immense that Hong desperate to protect her children and grandchildren from Daphne's perceived spiritual wrath, had made a tragic suggestion. She allegedly suggested that they allow her to pass away so the family could collect on her. Substantial life insurance policy to pay off the debt to Daphne. Chow claimed that Daphne embraced the idea, but insisted that one policy was not enough to cover the entire debt and secure her full payment. She wanted both Long and Hong gone so they could collect on both policies, totaling over $1 million. While investigators were deeply skeptical of Chow's claim that the sweet, elderly Hong had volunteered for such a fate, viewing it as a highly convenient narrative to minimize his own guilt, the prosecution recognized that Chow's testimony was absolutely essential to secure a conviction against the mastermind, Daphne Wright. After careful consideration, the district attorney's office made a difficult decision. They offered Chow Tran complete immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full, truthful testimony against Daphne Wright, Bobby Guillory, and Willie Guillory. Sometimes, a detective reflected quietly, you have to make a deal with the devil to get the puppet master. The Courtroom of Truth. On August 26, 2019, the capital murder trial of Daphne Wright began in a crowded Tarrant County courtroom. The trial drew intense interest from the local community and the media, revealing a bizarre story of spiritual faith, financial greed, and ultimate betrayal. Taking the stand as the state's star witness, Chow Tran painted a vivid picture of Daphne as a ruthless, manipulative loan shark who used her spiritual influence to systematically drain his family of their resources, ultimately demanding the lives of two sweet, elderly people to satisfy her greed. The defense launched a vigorous attack on Chow's credibility, arguing that he was a true instigator of the plot, driven by the desire to pocket the $1 million insurance payout for himself. You ran up a $280,000 bill with no physical contract, no email, and no documentation, the defense attorney argued during a fierce cross-examination. The truth is, Chow Tran wanted that money, and he used this story to walk away free. The defense also highlighted that even if Chow's story were true, he was deeply complicit in the conspiracy, having admittedly left the apartment key under the mat for the attackers to access his in-laws' home. Yet, despite the defense's efforts to shift the focus, the state presented a powerful chain of evidence: the physical ledger found in Daphne's home, the detailed confessions of Bobby and Willie Guillory, and the undeniable financial trail connecting the parties. In September of 2019, after hours of intense deliberation, the jury returned with its verdict. Daphne Wright was found guilty of capital murder. She was sentenced to the ultimate punishment available under the law: life in prison without the possibility of parole. Both Bobby Guillory and Willie Guillory were also convicted for their roles in the physical act, receiving lengthy prison sentences that ensured they would spend decades behind physical bars. Reflections in the light. For the detectives who had dedicated years of their lives to solving the tragic deaths of Long, Gwen, and Hong Lu, the conclusion of the trials brought a complex mix of relief and lingering sadness. Daphne Wright, the woman who had transformed her client's spiritual beliefs into a web of greed and violence, would spend the rest of her days in a maximum security prison. The physical perpetrators were off the streets, and the community was safe from their reach. Yet, the fact that Chow Tran walked out of the courtroom a free man, protected by his immunity agreement, remained a difficult pill for many to swallow. It will never sit entirely well with me that Chow Tran is not in prison, one of the lead detectives admitted, looking out the window at the quiet Arlington streets. He played a role in this tragedy, and he should have faced the same justice as the others. But as the sun set over the city, casting long, peaceful shadows across the manicured lawns of the residential neighborhoods, the detective found comfort in a deeper, timeless truth. What is done in the dark always eventually comes to light, he said softly. They will all have to answer for what they did. In one way or another, Justice has its own way of balancing the ledger. In the end, the story of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu is not defined by the dark tragedy of their final hours, but by the beautiful, shining legacy of the 20 years they spent building a life of love, craft, and devotion in their new home. Their memory remained a cherished light within the hearts of their grandchildren, a testament to the enduring strength of the human spirit and the quiet, beautiful power of a family's love. The sun rose over the city of Arlington, Texas, casting a warm, golden glow across the quiet suburban neighborhoods. It was a place where different cultures met and thrived together, creating a rich tapestry of lives woven from stories of hope and resilience. Among the many who had come to this vibrant community in search of a peaceful, prosperous future were Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. In the year 2000, the elderly couple had made the monumental decision to leave their homeland of Vietnam and journey to the United States. They brought with them very little in the way of material wealth, but their hearts were filled with an abundance of love, time-honored traditions, and an unwavering commitment to their family. They settled in Tarrant County, joining a large and supportive Vietnamese community that had been growing steadily since the late 1970s. Long and Hong were gentle, hard-working people. They believed in the quiet power of honest labor and the strength of family bonds. To establish a lasting legacy for their 3 beloved children and grandchildren, they started a commercial sewing business. It was a modest operation at first, filled with the rhythmic hum of sewing machines and the bright colors of various fabrics. To bridge the gap between their traditional world and their new American reality, they relied heavily on their son-in-law, Chow Tran. Chow was 38 years old, bright, and possessed the strongest command of the English language within the family. He became the public face of the business, handling the contracts, communicating with suppliers, and managing the daily negotiations. For nearly a decade, the family worked tirelessly side by side. Their efforts were rewarded when they secured a highly lucrative contract to produce garments for a massive commercial giant, none other than Disney. For a time, it seemed as though their American dream had truly blossomed into a beautiful reality. They were a prominent, respected family, known for their kindness and generosity to everyone they met. Chapter 2: The Gathering Shadows. By the year 2011, however, the tides of fortune began to turn. The economic climate shifted, and the highly prized contract with Disney was lost. Without that steady stream of income, the family sewing business began to struggle. The rhythmic hum of the machines grew quiet, and anxiety settled over the household like a heavy fog. In their culture, a sudden turn of bad luck was often viewed through a spiritual lens. For thousands of years, people in their homeland had believed in the influence of spiritual forces, in the protective power of lucky deities, and the danger of unseen curses. When faced with the threat of bankruptcy and the loss of everything they had built, the family felt a deep, instinctive need for traditional spiritual protection and healing. It was Chow Tran and his mother-in-law, Hong Lu, who began searching for a solution. While browsing through a local Vietnamese newspaper, they came across an advertisement that seemed to offer a glimmer of hope. It was for a spiritual advisor located in Houston, approximately 250 miles away. The woman advertised herself as a powerful spiritual practitioner who could lift terrible curses, bestow good fortune, and restore balance to troubled lives. Encouraged by Hong, who held deeply to the old-style mysticism of her heritage, Chow made contact with the advisor. Her name was Daphne Wright. She agreed to meet Chow at her home in Houston for a formal consultation. Desperate to save the family business and protect his loved ones from what they believed was a spiritual curse, Chow made the long drive to Houston. He participated in a ritual and returned home carrying a renewed sense of hope. The family genuinely believed that their fortunes were about to take a turn for the better, and that the dark clouds hanging over their lives would finally disperse. Chapter 3: The Cost of Hope. A year passed, but the promised restoration did not arrive. Instead, the family found themselves caught in a complex web of financial dependency. Daphne Wright was a charismatic and commanding figure who quickly realized how deeply the family trusted her spiritual authority. She began to charge exorbitant fees for her continuous rituals, her blessings, and her promises to ward off evil. Because the sewing business was not recovering, Chow and Hong could not pay her fees up front. Rather than stopping her services, Daphne began running a ledger credit for them. The debt grew steadily, ballooning over the months until it reached an astronomical amount between $250,000 and $280,000. Daphne was not a typical spiritual advisor. She operated with the cold calculation of a financial shark. She made it abundantly clear to Chow that she expected her money, one way or another, and that those who failed to pay her would face dire consequences. The fear of her spiritual wrath, combined with the crushing weight of their real-world debt, left the family feeling trapped in a deep hole with no obvious way out. It was during this period of immense stress that Daphne learned about two substantial life insurance policies held by the elderly couple. The policies were valued at a minimum of $1 million, with Chow Tran named as a primary beneficiary. A dark plan began to take shape in Daphne's mind. She suggested to Chow that the only way to clear the massive debt and secure the family's financial future was through the collection of those insurance policies. Chapter 4, The Silent Apartment. On the morning of June 10th, 2012, at exactly 7:29 in the morning, the peace of a quiet Arlington neighborhood was broken when Chow Tran called emergency dispatchers. He requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, explaining that his family had gathered at the apartment but found the windows open and the home in complete disarray. They were too terrified to enter on their own. Officer Weller was the first to arrive at the scene right away. He felt that something was unusual. Welfare checks were rarely requested so early in the morning, and seeing an entire family waiting anxiously outside the apartment building heightened his concern. Weller entered the residence, calling out to see if anyone was home. The apartment was quiet. In the living room and kitchen, there were signs of what appeared to be a burglary. Items were thrown about, and a collection of compact discs was scattered across the floor. Weller moved through the rooms, checking the kitchen, the bathroom, and finally the bedroom. Finding no one, he initially believed the family had simply gone out for an early morning walk. As he turned to leave the bedroom, however, his flashlight beam caught a series of hand smudges on the wall next to a small, unassuming closet door. A sense of hesitation washed over him. Every instinct told him that opening that door would change everything, but his dedication to his duty compelled him to act. He reached out and pulled the closet door open. Inside, he found Long Nguyen and Hong Lu. They had been bound with duct tape, and their heads and mouths were heavily wrapped. It was immediately clear that they had passed away. Weller, a veteran with 14 years of law enforcement experience, was struck with a profound sense of shock. He stepped out of the room, unable to speak or use his radio for a brief, agonizing moment, before finally calling for his supervisor and the crime scene unit. Chapter 5, Stage Whispers. When the Arlington homicide investigators arrived, led by Detective Stewart, they were deeply saddened by the loss of two beloved, harmless members of the community. Long and Hong were known as sweet, hard-working people who had never bothered anyone. The level of violence used against them was incredibly distressing. At first glance, the crime scene pointed toward a robbery. On the coffee table in the living room, investigators found a plate of crushed prescription pills and a marijuana cigarette, suggesting the presence of drug users. Most striking, however, was a light blue bandana wrapped around a beer bottle left on the table. In Arlington, certain active gangs use blue bandanas as their identifying colors. To the seasoned detectives, however, the scene felt almost too perfect. It was as if someone had deliberately left a series of obvious clues to direct the blame toward. Local street gangs. Most gang robberies did not involve such highly specific, controlled methods of restraint. The sheer amount of duct tape used on the victims, 25 feet wrapped around Hong's face and 10 feet around Long's, suggested a deliberate, personal intent to silence them permanently. The autopsy later confirmed that the couple had not perished from blunt force trauma, despite suffering injuries from a heavy object. Instead, they had suffocated due to the tight wrapping of the tape. Homicide investigators began to suspect that the entire scene had been staged to look like a burglary gone wrong, hiding a far more personal and calculated motive. Chapter 6, The Cold Trail. In the days following the tragedy, Detective Stewart interviewed Chow Tran, who acted as the primary spokesperson for the grieving family. Chow explained that on the night of the incident, the entire family had gathered to celebrate his father-in-law's birthday. The elderly couple had enjoyed themselves immensely, staying until 10:30 before receiving a ride home from another family member. Chow and his family appear to have airtight alibis, as they had remained together playing cards until late into the night. When questioned about money, Chow claimed the sewing business had been struggling and that they kept very little cash at home. He expressed absolute bewilderment as to why anyone would want to harm his gentle in-laws. Shortly after the funerals, Detective Stewart received a call from an insurance company inquiring about a policy worth $1 million. When the detective discovered that Chow was a beneficiary, his suspicions grew. However, there was no concrete evidence linking Chow or any other family member to crime. DNA samples and fingerprints collected from the family did not match the biological evidence recovered from the staged items at the scene, including the marijuana cigarette. For more than 2 years, the case remained cold. Investigators refused to give up, interviewing 50 to 60 neighbors, associates, and family members, but no active leads materialized. The files sat on the detectives' desks, a quiet reminder of a quiet couple who deserved to live out their golden years in peace. Chapter 7, The Unraveling Thread. The breakthrough came in October of the year 2015. In the most unexpected manner, a young man named Willie Guillory was arrested for a felony offense involving the theft of a horse near Houston because he was now an adult facing a felony charge. His DNA profile was entered into the national database. Within days, the system flagged a perfect match between Willie Guillory's DNA and the saliva found on the partially smoked marijuana cigarette left at the Arlington crime scene 3 years prior. At the time of the murders, Willie had been only 16 years old with no prior adult record, which was why his profile had never appeared in the system. Willie was brought to the Arlington Police Department for questioning. When confronted with the scientific certainty of the DNA match, the young man broke down in tears. He confessed his involvement, but insisted that he had not acted alone. He had been brought along by his 49-year-old uncle, Bobby Guillory. According to Willie, his uncle had been approached by a woman named Daphne Wright, who claimed that some people owed her a large sum of money and needed to be dealt with. Bobby was promised a payment of $10,000 to carry out the deed. On the night of June 9th, 2012, Bobby and Willie made the 3-hour drive from Houston to Arlington. Armed with a key to the apartment, which Daphne had provided, they entered the home, staged the scene with gang-related items, and waited in the darkness for the elderly couple to return. Chapter 8, The Web of Deceit. On December 16th, 2015, police arrested 52-year-old Bobby Guillory at his home in Katy, Texas, charging him with 2 counts of capital murder. Faced with the reality of his nephew's confession and a warrant for his own DNA, Bobby chose to cooperate with the authorities. Bobby explained that he had never been in trouble with the law before, but financial desperation had made him vulnerable to Daphne's manipulation. He confirmed that Daphne Wright was a mastermind behind the entire plot, driven by an insatiable desire to collect the money she believed she was owed. When investigators pressed Bobby on how Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment, Bobby delivered a shocking revelation. He stated that Daphne had received the key directly from Chow Tran. The revelation of this deep family betrayal left investigators stunned. They immediately secured search warrants for Daphne Wright's home in Houston. There, they discovered detailed business ledgers showing that she charged her clients tens of thousands of dollars for her spiritual services. The ledgers documented a thriving business built entirely on the fear and desperation of vulnerable people. Chapter 9, Justice and Grace. Faced with the overwhelming evidence gathered by the police, prosecutors sought to ensure that the primary mastermind behind the tragedy was held fully accountable. To secure a conviction against Daphne Wright, they offered Chow Tran immunity in exchange for a complete and honest testimony. During the trial in August of the year 2019, Chow took the stand. He portrayed Daphne as a greedy, manipulative woman who used her spiritual influence to control his mind and dominate his family. He claimed that his mother-in-law, Hong, had been so terrified of Daphne's spiritual power that she had actually suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to pay the debt. While the defense argued that Chow was a complicit partner who had acted out of personal greed to secure the insurance payout for himself, the jury ultimately focused on the actions of conspirators. In September of 2019, Daphne Wright was convicted of capital murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced justice for their roles in the conspiracy, though the legal journey left many with lingering questions about the full extent of Chow's involvement. The memory of Long Nguyen and Hong Lu was finally honored with the truth. Their journey from Vietnam to America had been defined by love, sacrifice, and a deep devotion to their family. In the end, the community they loved came together to remember them not for the tragedy that took them, but for the warmth, kindness, and gentle spirit they shared with the world. The morning sun of June 10th, 2012, rose over the city of Arlington, Texas, casting a warm, golden glow across the quiet suburban neighborhoods. It was a day that began like any other, filled with the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant hum of traffic on the nearby interstate. Yet, beneath this tranquil surface, a devastating mystery was about to unfold, one that would deeply shake the local community and test the resolve of the most experienced investigators on the police force. At exactly 7:29 in the morning, an emergency dispatcher received a phone call from a 38-year-old Vietnamese immigrant named Chow Tran. His voice was filled with a trembling anxiety that immediately signaled something was terribly wrong. He was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, who lived in a nearby apartment complex. The dispatcher patiently asked for their names, and Chow carefully spelled out his father-in-law's name, explaining that he was 70-something years old. During the call, Chow's anxiety escalated as he mentioned that his wife and teenage son had gone to the residence to knock on the door but received no response. They had noticed that a window to the apartment was slightly open and things inside appeared to be in complete disarray. Terrified of what they might find, the family chose to wait outside for the police to arrive rather than entering the home themselves. An officer named Weller was quickly dispatched to the scene. Upon arriving at the apartment complex, the officer immediately realized this was not a typical welfare check. A large group of family members stood outside in the early morning air, their faces etched with deep concern. This level of anxiety so early in the day was unusual. Stepping into the residence, the officer was met with an eerie silence. The apartment showed all the classic signs of a burglary. Drawers were pulled open, items were scattered across the floor, and the living room was in complete disarray. The officer called out, but there was no response. After checking the living room, the kitchen, and the bathroom, the only remaining area was the bedroom. Initially, a quick scan of the bedroom did not reveal anything out of the ordinary, and the officer felt a brief sense of relief, hoping the elderly couple had simply gone out for an early morning walk. However, as the officer turned to leave the room, The beam of the flashlight caught hand smudges on the wall next to a very small closet. A sudden instinct urged caution, a quiet inner voice suggesting that opening that door would change everything. Fulfilling the duty of the role, the officer reached out and opened the closet door. Inside, the tragic reality was revealed. The elderly husband and wife were found huddled together, bound tightly with duct tape around their bodies, heads, and mouths. There was no sign of life, and the scene was incredibly violent and distressing. Shocked and deeply saddened by the discovery, the officer stepped back into the living room, took a moment to regain composure, and immediately radioed for a supervisor and a crime scene unit. When the homicide investigators arrived, they were equally stunned by the severity of the crime. Long Nguyen and Hong had been subjected to significant blunt force trauma, suggesting they had been attacked as soon as they entered their home. There were signs of a struggle near the front door, with evidence of physical confrontation marked on the walls and carpet, stretching all the way to the back room. The living room had been heavily ransacked, with compact discs scattered everywhere, giving the initial impression of a robbery gone wrong. Yet, experienced detectives knew that the level of violence was far too extreme for a simple burglary. The victims were widely known as a kind, gentle, and hard-working couple who had no known enemies. Long and Hong had immigrated to the United States from Vietnam in the year 2000, bringing with them their deep-rooted cultural traditions, their beloved family, and a desire to build a prosperous life. They settled in Arlington, a vibrant city in Tarrant County, known for its diverse population and its large, supportive Vietnamese community, which had grown steadily since the late 1970s. Seeking to create a lasting legacy for their 3 children and grandchildren, the couple established a commercial sewing business. They enlisted the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, who spoke fluent English and became the public face of the business, managing relations with contractors and clients. For nearly a decade, the family experienced a fulfillment of their American dream, even securing a lucrative contract to manufacture garments for a major global entertainment corporation. However, by the year 2011, their business faced severe financial difficulties after losing this key contract. In times of deep distress, many families within their culture traditionally sought the guidance of spiritual advisors to help restore harmony and invite good fortune. Long and Hong were firm believers in these traditional spiritual practices. While searching a local Vietnamese newspaper, Chow and his mother-in-law found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located 250 miles away in Houston. The advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright, claimed she possessed the ability to remove negative curses and bring spiritual protection to those in need. Encouraged by his mother-in-law, Chow contacted Daphne and visited her Houston home for a consultation. Following a traditional ritual, the family felt a renewed sense of hope, believing their fortunes would soon turn around. Tragically, a year after this meeting, the elderly couple met their untimely end. As detectives processed the apartment, they discovered several unusual items that seemed designed to point toward local gang activity. There was a plate of crushed prescription pills on the coffee table, a marijuana cigarette, and a light blue bandana wrapped around a beer bottle. While Arlington did have active local gangs known for extortion, the scene felt almost too deliberately arranged. Detectives began to suspect that the entire crime scene had been staged to mislead the investigation. They carefully gathered physical evidence, including hair fibers, blood swabs, and the marijuana cigarette, hoping to find genetic markers that would identify the perpetrator. The initial interviews with family members yielded little information. Chow Tran, acting as a primary spokesperson, explained that the family had gathered the previous evening to celebrate his father-in-law's birthday. According to Chow, the elderly couple had a wonderful time, stayed until 10:30 in the evening, and received a ride home from another relative. Chow mentioned that while some community members preferred to keep cash at home rather than using banking institutions. His in-laws did not possess significant wealth. He expressed complete shock over the tragedy, insisting that the couple was deeply loved by everyone who knew them. An autopsy later confirmed that while the couple had suffered physical trauma, the actual cause of death was suffocation due to the extensive layers of duct tape wrapped around their faces. This revelation reinforced the detective's belief that the primary motive was not robbery, but a deliberate act of violence. The investigation took a significant turn when the lead detective received a call from an insurance company. It was revealed that the deceased couple held substantial life insurance policies totaling at least $1 million, and Chow Tran was named as one of the primary beneficiaries. When questioned about the insurance policies, Chow explained that the coverage was intended to ensure the continuity of the commercial sewing business in the event of a tragedy. He and his family provided consistent alibis for the night of the incident, explaining they had been playing cards together until late in the evening. Genetic samples and fingerprints collected from the family members did not match the evidence found at the crime scene, and the genetic markers recovered from a marijuana cigarette did not match any profiles within the National Database of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Investigators considered the possibility that the perpetrator might have been a minor with no prior criminal record, which would explain the lack of a database match. Despite interviewing dozens of neighbors, relatives, and associates, the case eventually went cold for more than 2 years. In October of the year 2015, a sudden breakthrough occurred. The police department received notification of a genetic database match from the marijuana cigarette found at the scene. The match belonged to Willie Guillory, who had recently been convicted of felony involving the theft of a horse in Houston. Because Willie was only 16 years old at the time of the murders in 2012, his genetic profile had not been entered into the national database until his recent adult conviction. Willie was brought in for a questioning under a parole violation. When presented with the scientific evidence placing him inside the apartment, the young man broke down and confessed. He revealed that he had not acted alone. He explained that in 2012 his uncle, Bobby Guillory, had recruited him to travel to Arlington to assist with a task. According to Willie, his uncle possessed a key to the apartment and instructed him to help stage the scene to make it look like a gang-related burglary. Willie admitted to smoking part of the marijuana cigarette that was left behind, which ultimately became the key piece of evidence linking him to the crime. He described how they waited for the couple to return, confronted them, and subsequently bound them with duct tape before placing them in the closet. When asked about the motive, Willie revealed a startling connection. He stated that the entire act was a murder-for-hire plot organized by a woman named Daphne Wright, the spiritual advisor from Houston. Willie claimed that Daphne had expressed anger over an outstanding debt and had declared that she wanted the individuals dead if they did not pay. This information shifted the focus of the investigation toward Daphne Wright. When detectives attempted to speak with Chow Tran regarding his connection to Daphne, he directed them to his legal counsel, raising further suspicions. Investigators then traveled to Katy, Texas, to arrest 52-year-old Bobby Guillory. Confronted with the evidence, Bobby also confessed, expressing deep regret and fear. He claimed he had never been in trouble with the law before and had been driven by financial desperation after losing his job. Bobby alleged that Daphne Wright had promised him $10,000 to carry out the deed. According to Bobby, Daphne operated as a demanding creditor. The financial transactions between the family and the spiritual advisor had escalated significantly, with the family accumulating a debt of between $250,000 and $280,000 in their pursuit of spiritual solutions. When the debt remained unpaid, Daphne allegedly learned of the substantial life insurance policies and devised a plan to recover her funds through the insurance payouts. Bobby further claimed that the key to the apartment had originally come from Chow Tran. On August 31st, 2016, detectives visited Daphne Wright's home in Houston. She was described as a strong-willed, direct woman who managed her household with authority. While she admitted to knowing Chow as a client, she refused to provide details regarding their financial arrangements. Following her arrest, a search of her home revealed detailed business ledgers showing that she charged clients tens of thousands of dollars for her spiritual services. Her husband maintained his innocence and claimed to have no knowledge of her business activities. With Daphne in custody, prosecutors sought to strengthen their case. They reviewed Chow Tran's financial records and discovered that he had purchased a new home after the tragedy, while the sewing business had permanently closed. To secure a conviction against the primary coordinators of the crime, the prosecution offered Chow immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full and truthful testimony. During the trial in August of the year 2019, Chow testified that he and his mother-in-law had felt deeply intimidated by Daphne, believing she possessed the power to influence their lives through spiritual means. He claimed that his mother-in-law had tragically suggested sacrificing herself so the family could collect the insurance money to satisfy the debt, a concept he claimed Daphne supported. The defense challenged Chow's credibility, pointing out the lack of written documentation for the alleged debt and arguing that Chow had acted out of personal financial greed. In September of the year 2019, the jury found Daphne Wright guilty of capital murder, and she was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory also faced legal accountability for their roles in the tragedy, while the lead investigators expressed lingering concerns that Chow Tran did not face criminal charges due to his immunity agreement. They remained dedicated to the pursuit of truth, finding solace in the fact that the primary organizers of the crime were brought to justice, restoring a sense of peace and closure to the community. The journey of a human spirit is often defined by the distances it is willing to travel to find a place called home. For Long Nguyen and Hong Lu, that journey began across the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean, carrying nothing but their deep love for one another, their 3 beloved children, and a resilient hope in the promise of a new land. In the year 2000, they left the familiar warmth of Vietnam to establish their roots in Arlington, Texas. Arlington was a sprawling, vibrant city in Tarrant County, known for its rich tapestry of diverse cultures and a large, welcoming Vietnamese community that had flourished since the late 1970s. For Long and Hong, the city represented the perfect canvas upon which to paint their version of the American dream. They were a gentle, deeply traditional couple, carrying the quiet wisdom of their heritage in every step. Long was a man of few words but immense strength, his hands worn from decades of honest labor. Hong was the heartbeat of the family, a woman whose sweetness and generosity warmed every room she entered. Together, they founded a commercial sewing business, transforming simple fabrics into beautiful garments. To bridge the gap between their traditional ways and the fast-paced American business environment, they enlisted the help of their son-in-law, Chow Tran, a 38-year-old immigrant who spoke fluent English and possessed a natural knack for communication. Chow became the public face of the enterprise, negotiating contracts and managing relations with external partners. For nearly a decade, the sewing business thrived. Their dedication was rewarded when they secured a highly lucrative contract with commercial giant, producing themed apparel for major global entertainment brands, including prestigious contracts with enterprises like Disney. It was a time of immense pride and celebration. The family gathered often, sharing laughter, traditional meals, and dreams of a secure future for their children and grandchildren. They believed that their hard work had finally built a legacy that would stand the test of time. However, the tides of fortune are notoriously fickle. By the year 2011, the contract that had sustained their prosperity came to an end, and the business began a steady, worrisome decline. As the machines fell silent and the bills accumulated, anxiety cast a long shadow over the household. Long and Hong, raised in a culture that deeply respected the spiritual forces of the universe, believed that their sudden string of bad luck was not merely economic, but perhaps spiritual in nature. For generations, their ancestors had believed in the power of spiritual alignments, seeking the guidance of wise advisors to lift burdens, invite prosperity, and restore harmony when families face major life hurdles such as financial distress, marital discord, or legal troubles. Desperate to protect his family and revive the business, Chao Tran searched through a local Vietnamese newspaper and found an advertisement for a spiritual advisor located 250 miles away in Houston. The advertisement promised powerful rituals capable of lifting ancient curses and bringing immediate good fortune, encouraged by his mother-in-law, Hong, who felt a deep maternal responsibility to save the family business. Chow reached out to the advisor, a woman named Daphne Wright. Daphne agreed to meet them at her home in Houston for a consultation. Chow and Hong made the journey, filled with hope and a profound sense of relief. During their initial meeting, Daphne performed an elaborate ritual designed to cleanse their business of negative energy. The family returned to Arlington with renewed optimism, believing that their path was finally clear. Yet, as the months passed, the economic clouds did not part. Instead of changing course, Chow and Hong found themselves caught in a psychological trap, continually pouring their dwindling resources into more complex and expensive rituals. Daphne, sensing their desperation, began running their accounts on credit, allowing the debt to balloon to an astronomical sum between $250,000 and $280,000. Unbeknownst to the family, their spiritual savior was slowly revealing herself to be a ruthless opportunist. Daphne was not merely an advisor. She was a master of psychological manipulation, holding a terrifying sway over their minds. She made it clear that those who failed to pay her would face dire spiritual and physical consequences, declaring that she would retrieve her money by any means necessary. When she learned that Chow and his wife were the designated beneficiaries of substantial life insurance policies held by Long and Hong, policies valued at over $1 million, a dark and terrible plan began to take shape in her mind. On the morning of June 10th, 2012, at 7:29 in the morning, the peaceful silence of an Arlington neighborhood was shattered when emergency dispatchers received a worried phone call from Chow Tran. He requested a welfare check on his elderly in-laws, explaining that they had not answered their door and that his teenage son had reported seeing signs of disarray through an open window. When the responding officers arrived, they found the family gathered outside the apartment, frozen in apprehension. Officer Weller, a dedicated public servant with 14 years of experience, entered the quiet apartment. The living room was in complete disarray, resembling a burglary. Compact discs were scattered across the floor. Furniture was overturned, and a heavy, unsettling silence hung in the air. Weller called out, but received no response. Moving cautiously through the apartment, Weller searched the kitchen and the bathroom, finding them empty. Finally, he entered the bedroom. At first glance, the room appeared unoccupied, but as he turned to leave, his flashlight illuminated hand smudges on the wall next to a very small closet. Guided by a professional duty that overcame a sudden, instinctual dread, Weller opened the closet door. Inside, he made a discovery that would haunt him for the rest of his career. Long Nguyen and Hong Lu were positioned inside, bound tightly with duct tape. Their faces were wrapped extensively in the gray adhesive material. There was blood on the walls, the carpet, and the furniture, indicating a violent struggle near the entrance of the apartment that had ended in this dark, hidden space. Weller, in a state of profound shock, stepped back into the living room and immediately radioed for a supervisor and the homicide unit. When veteran homicide investigators, including Detective Stewart, arrived at the scene, they were struck by the sheer brutality of the crime. Long and Hong had suffered blunt force trauma to their heads, likely inflicted by a heavy object, such as a hammer or a small bat, but the medical examiner later determined that the true cause of death was suffocation caused by the extensive layers of duct tape wrapped around their faces. Hong's face had been wrapped in 25 feet of tape, while Long's was encased in 10 feet. The level of violence was deeply personal and far exceeded that of a typical robbery. Seeking clues, detectives noted several items left prominently in the living room, including a plate of crushed prescription pills on the coffee table and a discarded marijuana cigarette. Most striking of all was a light blue bandana wrapped carefully around a beer bottle. To the investigators, this appeared to be a calling card from one of the active local gangs known for extorting money within the Vietnamese community. However, the scene felt almost too orchestrated, as if someone had deliberately staged these items to mislead the police. Detectives began their investigation by interviewing Chow Tran, who acted as the primary spokesperson for the grieving family. Chow explained that the entire family had attended a joyous birthday celebration for Long the previous evening, staying until 10:30. He claimed his in-laws had received a ride home and were never seen alive again. Chow maintained that while the business had struggled, his in-laws had no known enemies and were deeply loved by everyone in the community. A breakthrough occurred when Detective Stewart received a routine inquiry from an insurance company regarding a life insurance policy valued at approximately $1 million, listing Chow Tran as a primary beneficiary. When questioned, Chow explained that the policy was intended to ensure the continuity of the family business in the event of a tragedy. While detectives collected genetic profiles and fingerprints from all family members, including Chow, the results did not match the evidence recovered from the scene, including the genetic material found on the discarded marijuana cigarette. With no matches in the national database, the investigation gradually slowed, and for 3 long years, the case went cold. The silence was finally broken on October 12, 2015, when the Arlington Police Department received an unexpected notification from the National Genetic Database. A profile matching the genetic material from a marijuana cigarette had been entered into the system. The profile belonged to Willie Guillory, a young man who had recently been convicted of a felony involving the theft of a horse in Houston. In 2012, Willie had been only 16 years old, meaning his genetic profile had not been in the adult database at the time of the murders. His subsequent felony conviction as an adult had finally brought his information to light. On October 17, 2015, officers apprehended Willie Guillory for a parole violation and brought him in for questioning. When confronted with the irrefutable genetic evidence placing him inside the Arlington apartment, the young man broke down in tears and confessed. He revealed that he had not acted alone. He had been led to the apartment by his uncle, 49-year-old Bobby Guillory, who had promised him a share of a financial reward. Willie explained that they had traveled 3 hours from Houston to Arlington on June 9, 2012. His uncle possessed a key to the apartment, which allowed them to enter without forcing the door. Following a prearranged plan, they threw items around the living room, left a beer bottle wrapped in the blue bandana, and scattered the pills to make the crime look like the work of a local street gang. Willie admitted to smoking the marijuana cigarette and leaving the remains behind, completely unaware that this small act would eventually lead to their capture. According to Willie, when the elderly couple returned home, a violent struggle ensued. Bobby struck Long with a blunt instrument to incapacitate him, while Willie restrained Hong. Together, they bound the couple, carried them to the bedroom closet, and wrapped their faces in duct tape before fleeing the scene. When detectives asked why they had targeted this gentle couple, Willie pointed directly to a woman named Daphne Wright, a close associate of his uncle. He claimed that Daphne had orchestrated the entire plot because the couple owed her a massive debt, famously declaring that if they did not pay, she wanted them dead. Armed with this critical information, detectives traveled to Katy, Texas on December 16, 2015, and arrested Bobby Guillory on 2 counts of capital murder. Faced with a search warrant for his genetic profile, Bobby also confessed. He explained that in 2011, he had been unemployed, desperate, and struggling to survive on the streets. Daphne Wright had exploited his financial desperation, offering him $10,000 to carry out the hit. Bobby confirmed that Daphne was a mastermind of the operation, dictating every detail of how the crime should be executed and staged. More shockingly, Bobby claimed that Daphne had obtained the key to the apartment directly from Chow Tran himself. This revelation forced investigators to reevaluate Chow's role in the tragedy. Under subpoena, Chow's financial records revealed that following the deaths of his in-laws, he had closed a sewing business and purchased a brand new home. Facing the pressure of the mounting evidence, Chow, accompanied by his attorney, agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. He painted a complex portrait of psychological captive-taking, claiming that he and his mother-in-law had been utterly terrified of Daphne's supposed spiritual powers, believing she could place a devastating curse on their family if they failed to pay. Chow made the extraordinary claim that Hong Lu, out of a desperate desire to protect her children from Daphne's wrath, had suggested sacrificing her own life so the family could collect the insurance money to settle the debt. According to Chow, Daphne eagerly embraced the idea, but insisted that both Long and Hong must die so that both insurance policies could be claimed, fully covering the outstanding balance. Once the insurance payouts were processed, Chow paid Daphne a massive sum in cash. While prosecutors harbored deep skepticism regarding Chow's claim that his mother-in-law had willingly participated in her own demise, they recognized that his testimony was absolutely vital to securing a conviction against the true mastermind of the conspiracy. In a difficult but necessary legal decision, the prosecution offered Chow immunity from prosecution in exchange for his full and truthful testimony against Bobby, Willie, and Daphne. On August 26, 2019, the trial of Daphne Wright commenced. Chow Tran took the stand as the state's star witness, delivering a powerful and emotional account that depicted Daphne as a remarkably greedy and manipulative individual who would stop at nothing to secure her financial gain. The defense team fiercely attacked Chow's credibility, pointing out the lack of documented financial transactions and arguing that Chow had orchestrated the crime himself to pocket the $850,000 in insurance proceeds. In September of 2019, after careful deliberation, the jury delivered its verdict. Daphne Wright was found guilty of capital murder and received the ultimate penalty of life in prison, without the possibility of parole. Bobby and Willie Guillory were likewise brought to justice for their direct roles in the physical attack. Though the legal proceedings brought a measure of closure, the resolution left a lingering sense of incompletion for the investigators who had poured their hearts into the case. The reality that Chow Tran remained free, shielded by his immunity agreement, was a difficult burden for many to carry. Yet, the story of Long, Nguyen, and Hong Lu remains a powerful testament to the enduring strength of family bonds, the tireless dedication of law enforcement officers who refuse to let a cold case fade into obscurity, and the eternal truth that even the most carefully hidden secrets will eventually be brought into the light of justice. In the heart of Texas, where the vast sky meets a vibrant mosaic of cultures, the city of Arlington stood as a testament to the pursuit of the American dream. Among the many who had traveled across oceans to build a new legacy was a family that brought with them the rich, time-honored traditions of their homeland. They sought nothing more than peace, honest work, and a bright future for their children. Yet, when a sudden mystery cast a shadow over their quiet neighborhood, it would take the dedication of a thoughtful police force, the power of truth, and an unwavering commitment to justice to restore the harmony of this close-knit community. This is a story not just of an investigation, but the resilient spirit of a community that chose hope over fear. Chapter 1. A Quiet Morning in Arlington. The morning of June 10th, 2012, began with the gentle warmth typical of a Texas summer. The sun cast a golden glow over the suburban avenues, where the leaves of oak trees rustled in the soft breeze. At precisely 7:29 in the morning, the calm of the Arlington Emergency Dispatch Center was broken by a call from 38-year-old Chow Tran. Chow, a Vietnamese immigrant who worked diligently alongside his family, was calling to request a welfare check on his elderly in-laws. His voice, carrying a mix of concern and urgency, filled the quiet room of the dispatcher. "Can you give me their names?" the dispatcher asked, her voice calm and reassuring. "My dad's name is long," Chow replied, spelling out the letters slowly. "Last name Nguyen. He is 70-something right now. My family is very worried." Chow explained that his teenage son had gone and knocked on the door of the apartment, but there had been no response. Gathering outside the residence, the family had noticed an open window, an unusual sight that heightened their anxiety. Too anxious to enter the home on their own, they waited on the sidewalk, hoping for a reassuring word from the authorities. The arrival of the first responder, Officer Weller, a dedicated public servant with 14 years of experience in community policing, was the first to arrive at the scene. He was known for his approachable demeanor and his ability to bring a sense of calm to tense situations. As he pulled up to the apartment complex, he noticed the family members standing together, their faces etched with concern. It was unusually early for a welfare check, and the sheer number of family members gathered outside suggested that this was a deeply united household. "Officer," Weller greeted them warmly, promising to check the residence thoroughly to ensure everyone was safe and sound. Entering the apartment, Officer Weller called out into the quiet space. The living room was quiet, with sunlight streaming through the blinds. The kitchen was neat, holding the faint aroma of traditional spices. The bathroom was empty. At first glance, the apartment appeared to be in disarray, with items scattered as if a hurried search had taken place. Officer Weller, focused entirely on finding the elderly couple, moved toward the bedroom. Initially, he saw no one and felt a momentary wave of relief, thinking perhaps they had simply gone for an early morning walk in the park to enjoy the cool air. However, as he turned to leave, his flashlight caught faint hand smudges on the wall next to a small closet door. A professional